Okay, hi everyone. So today is day 4, I believe, of our sock journey. And the things I need to remind you about this morning are, my name is Kelly Slack. I was invited to guest teach by Heather of Pearly Shell Fiber Arts. I'm the co-owner of Black Sheep Fiber Emporium with my partner Tina. And this is segment, all of these videos are sponsored by Black Sheep Fiber Emporium, Kelly Slack Designs, and Pearly Shell. So make sure that you are giving them some love by following their social media accounts. And yes, we do have Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. So you can find us on all of these places. Let's see. I have 2 master's degrees in teaching, so I love to teach. I'm a self-published author of 2 books, Hoppy Feet, which is about socks, and Froth and Foam, which is about lace. I've made over 100 pairs of socks, so while I don't know everything, I do know a lot. And if I'd get a little more sleep, I would remember a little bit more. But that's neither here nor there since I have a toddler. Today we are talking all about tools, needles, and techniques. So today is about kind of thinking about the mechanics of knitting socks. And we are going to focus on socks that are knit in the round. We'll talk about socks that are knit in other ways in my very last video. And we're going to focus on socks that are made one of 2 ways in the round. We're going to look at top down and toe up. So again, we'll look at some of the more interesting ways that you can make socks in the very last video in this series, but for the purposes of my sock videos, we're going to focus on the top down and the toe up socks knit in the round. And I'm sorry, I think it's a little bit bright, and so I was trying to shade this, but now you can't see me. Oh, now it's like way bright. Well, we'll see what we can do. The sun decided to come out in Missouri today, even though it's still kind of cool this morning. All right, so I love tools. That's part of why I like knitting. I never really got into bobbin lace, although I probably should have because there's tons of tools there, but I love tools. I like having lots of options. I like having lots of different needles. I have tried most of the techniques that we're going to talk about today, and I have settled into sort of a rhythm for what I like best. And that's really what it comes down to, is you need to knit socks in the way that you like best. So if you like doing toe up best, do toe up. If you like doing top down best, do top down. If you like socks on 2 circulars, or if you prefer socks on magic loop, if you want to do 2 at a time, do it. Because it's about knitting in the way that makes you happiest. And so I've tried them all. Tried all the different manner of sock making, but the way that makes me happiest is double pointed needles, top down. So that's what I tend to design, and that's what I tend to knit, because it's what makes me happiest. But every so often I do like to design in other ways, and I might make a toe up sock. There might be a special stitch that I want to use, and it really looks best if it's knit toe up instead of top down. And so you may find that I have a few different patterns out there as well. All right. So let's grab some fun things. Let's talk about socks on 2 circs first. So for that, if you're going to do socks on 2 circulars, you need 2 circulars that are the same size. And when you make your socks on 2 circulars, what you're going to do is, and I'm going to actually use these flexies as a demonstration. You will have 2 needles, and they will be running like this. And with socks on 2 circulars, you'll knit off of one needle and around, and then knit off the other needle and around. And it works great. Socks on 2 circulars works great. You can do 2 at a time on 2 circulars pretty easily. The hardest part is making sure that you keep your balls separated so that you don't knit from sock A into sock B, because that doesn't work so well. You don't want to knit your socks together. You know, there is a technique I haven't tried where you knit one sock inside the other from 2 separate balls, and it has to do something with a technique similar to, I believe, double knitting, and I've always wanted to try that, because then you just go and you whip them out and you have 2 different socks in the end, but I've never managed that. So there is one thing I haven't tried. Kind kind of an advanced thing as far as I'm concerned that I haven't tried. So socks on 2 circulars is a great way to go. It's really easy to set up in terms of either toe up or top down. You just have 2 circulars. You have 2 circulars, it's really easy to work. You just go around and around and around and just keep swapping out circulars. It's not a big deal. It's not hard. There's lots of great videos out there on YouTube that will show you how to get started, or there might even be some more on Facebook as well. Socks on 2 circulars is a great way to do it if that's your thing. And if you haven't tried it, you definitely should. Of course, you're going to need two needles of the same size, and don't forget, as we talked about during our gauge session, that you should always swatch with those needles to make sure that you are getting the gauge that you want and that your needles are working with the yarn that you have. So, very important to remember that. Double pointed needles, I use double pointed needles a lot. So double pointed needles, these guys. In fact, I think I've got a tiny little gauge swatch that I was starting to show you all right here on my circulars. The key with circulars is that as you're going around, you need to make sure that you give a little extra tug at the first and second stitch of every needle, so that as you go around, you don't get ladders in your work. When you're working on socks on 2 circulars, that's also an important point, is that where the 2 circulars come together, you just need to give it a little extra tug as you work your first couple of stitches. Again, just to make sure that you don't have issues with laddering, and that's where it comes apart and it looks like you have a little ladder between your stitches. It's just because there's a little extra yarn there. Yes, it's really important, as Alice is saying, to mark the sides of your sock to avoid knitting onto the wrong needle, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So as you join in the round, let's say I was working in the round. I'll have to do it the other way because I'm on the wrong side row. You can also knit socks inside out if you'd really like to do that. You could do all purls instead of all knits. If you're using a Portuguese style of knitting, then that's actually much faster, just mentioning. But all you're going to do is at these little points where your needles come together as you get ready to work your first and second stitch, you just want to give it a little extra tug. So you'll knit your stitch and then tug it a little tighter, knit your stitch, tug it a little tighter, and then keep going. That's it. That's the key for both socks on 2 circs and double pointed needles. With the flexible needles, I've knit on the flexible needles. It's not my favorite way to knit socks, but they aren't bad. I like them really well for just a plain knit sock, just a plain stockinette sock. I don't like them quite as well for socks that have any kind of patterning, but these guys, this is what I'm talking about when I say the flexible needles. So these are the Hiya Flyers. There's also Addi Flexi Flips, I believe is what they're called. And these guys, when you put them in, I basically use these as my placeholder, and then you use your third needle to work. So it's a little bit like working on double points, and it's a little bit like working on the circulars, which is what they're intended to be. So you'll work across one needle and kind of replace it, and that's how those work, right? These flexible needles. I'll see if I can set that up really fast and show you. So magic loop then is the other one that we need to talk about. And the flexible needles, I'm sorry, I should go back and say that too. The flexible needles, you'll also need to make sure that you are tugging at the edges where those points meet. So double pointed needles, socks on 2 circs, and the flexible needles, all 3 of those are going to be instances where you will have to tug just a little bit at the points where your needles join, because you want to make sure that you don't have ladders going up your work. It's very important. Trying to see if I can really quick get this all set up for you. And then magic loop is really cool. There's a couple of different ways to do it. There's the Mickey Mouse eared version, and then there's what I think of as the elephant version, which has just 1 big loop instead of 2 big loops. But it really depends on what you're comfortable with and what makes you happy. I sometimes end up working sort of with 2 loops, and sometimes I end up working with 1, and it just depends a little bit on what exactly I'm working and what part I'm at. Sometimes I need 2 loops at the tip of a toe for a top-down sock, or the tip of a toe for a toe-up sock as well, because I need that extra space. All right, so here's some laddering that's occurring. This is what I'm talking about with laddering. It's this big extra space right here. So ideally you don't want this, but because I am just sort of faking a demonstration. All right, so here's your idea right here with your little flexible needles. You have 1 on each side, and I kind of split them. That's what I always like to do. And then you work across, and you would replace it. Now, when it comes to the magic loop, let's see. I still have time, good. There's one. So this one's a little bit short for a magic loop. Usually for magic loop, you want a longer needle, so something like, a 32. The 24 is usually a little bit too short for me, but usually a 32 has plenty of space. So with this one, I'm just gonna replace my needles again. And we're gonna make loops. We're gonna make loops, and it'll be interesting. You do sometimes have to watch, and again, make sure that you don't have laddering at the points where you have your loops. So it's a little bit different than when you're using your flexible needles or your double-pointed needles. So I put like half on one side, and then bring my needle around, then put half on the other side, bring my needle around. There we go. So when we're looking at magic loop, this is what I mean. So you can have like just sort of 1 loop hanging off out here, or sometimes you need 2 loops. So sometimes I have to pull a second loop out, especially in really tight spaces. I might have to pull a second loop out here so that I can get my work to sit where I need it to be, so that everything is all tight and tidy. So magic loop. Don't be afraid of magic loop. It's really fun. It's not that difficult to do. And again, there's lots of great videos out there that show you exactly how to do a magic loop. But this is the idea, is just that you've got, loops that are hanging out. And depending on how big your sleeve is or your sock, you may need 2 loops, you may need 3 loops. The length of your needles can also affect this, so sometimes shorter needles help with this. Anyway, just an idea of what that looks like. So, having said all of that, what are some tips and tricks that we can use to make sure that our socks are always the way that we want them with the technique that we're using? Of course, you always want to have a pair of scissors, and you always want to have some tapestry needles in your bag. Tape measure is always a good thing to carry. Sometimes it's nice to have some little flags or highlighter tape. Highlighter tape is fabulous if you're using a paper pattern or using the highlighting function in a PDF. And the other thing that's really nice to have is lots and lots of stitch markers. And stitch markers in different shapes and different weights and different sizes. Really, really helpful. First of all, I'm a bit of a magpie, so I like collecting stitch markers, and I have a lot of them. Some of my favorites are simple ones that are locking stitch markers, because you can either use them closed to actually mark between your stitches, or you can use them in your work. The clover ones are all right. We sell some at Black Sheep that I like a little bit better. They're thinner and they're metal, and they're thinner. I like that they're thinner because they fit a little bit better. Another option is something like, just a really simple little ring. We sell these at Black Sheep as well. That was my alarm, so I don't go over. These are really nice to have. Just a simple, plain little stitch marker, but they're great for marking a space between stitches. And they're cheap, so if you lose one, it's not as big a deal. But I also love having fancy blingy ones, and so, like I said, I collect stitch markers, and there's never, you can never tell exactly what I'm going to have. This one, I think Tina made this one for us one time. That's like one of those little Lego flowers, I think, on a stitch marker. Lots of fun. Yes, so, and Elizabeth added on there, it's also a great idea to keep a crochet hook for drop stitches, but I will tell you that I've made so many items now that I don't actually keep a crochet hook in most of my bags, because I just learned how to pick up stitches without using a crochet hook. And yeah, it's a little bit magical, and I should probably teach that on a video one day. All right, so hopefully you have learned something to either add to your toolkit or had some ideas about how maybe you want to knit socks. The next time that we meet, which will be tomorrow, and that's at 2:30 Central, we are going to do top-down socks. We're starting with top-down socks because those are my favorite. And we're going to talk about cast-ons. I believe it's cast-ons and possibly, I think it's just cast-ons tomorrow for top-down. Yes, just cast-ons. So make sure that you tune in tomorrow for more info about socks, and we're going to start with the top-down and talk about cast-ons. That would be great for that. And don't forget to go subscribe to all of our fabulous sponsors. Follow along with them. That's Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, or TikTok, whatever your pleasure is. For Black Sheep Fiber Emporium, myself at Kelly Slack Designs, and Pearly Shell Fiber. So I will see you guys tomorrow for more sock adventures.